Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Young, would you say that this administration is economically, financially, and fiscally incompetent and doesn't understand the consequences of this indefensible budget? Or worse, does this administration does understand the tremendous harm they're doing to the country and therefore wants to destroy the country financially and bankrupt our future?
Mr. Good, thank you for that. I don't accept either of those.
Yeah, I'm going to reclaim my time and not make you try to defend the indefensible. A small business owner within the hour just told me on the phone, he's a builder, a developer, a job created with my home district in Virginia 5, and he just said, quote, nothing they're doing makes sense unless they hate the country. So again, I'm going to take most of my time to speak rather than ask you to defend the indefensible, because this proposed budget exposes either the incompetence or the deviousness of this administration. You literally couldn't do more harm fiscally to the country unless you were doing it on purpose. To spend $73 trillion, God forbid Democrats ever find out what comes after a trillion, so that you spend $73 trillion over the next 10 years, a 66% increase, 66% over the previous 10-year period. For what? What is the average American going to get for this budget? What are they going to get besides higher taxes on all Americans, more debt, which will require additional higher taxes, rapidly increasing inflation, which decreases purchasing power, in effect, another higher tax on Americans, less control over their own lives and how they spend their money, decisions they make from what kind of cars they drive to how they heat their homes, and a bleaker financial future for their children and their grandchildren. This budget proposes $58 trillion in taxes, 80% increase over the previous 10 years. The only thing the Democrats do more or raise more quickly than spending is taxes, again, on all Americans. But not to worry, to any American who has the misfortune of watching this hearing, not to worry, because this budget hires 87,000 more IRS agents, America, to make sure they collect those taxes they intend to increase on all of you and to make sure that you pay what they consider to be your fair share. I'm sure my fellow colleagues and members in this committee hear from their constituents the same thing I do. The one thing we need is more IRS agents. How about if we instead make the IRS employees actually come to work and process those outstanding tax refunds from last year? Incredibly, when we owe $30 trillion in national debt, and I'm embarrassed to say that on this committee, when I say that, I have members on the other side say, don't talk about how much we owe, because when I say it's $90,000 per citizen right now, $90,000 per citizen for 330 million Americans for $30 trillion in national debt, I get told by leadership on this committee, don't say that because we're not asking anybody to pay it back, as if it's not real, as if it's monopoly money and it doesn't matter, it doesn't count. It's already what the third largest budget item is, paying the interest on the debt. Every 1% increase in the interest rate costs us roughly $300 billion a year just to pay the debt. So I'm sure this administration, so here we got $30,000 in debt, and we actually propose or admit, we have the audacity to admit that we're going to intend to increase the national debt by another $16 trillion over 10 years. $16 trillion over 10 years, that's $50,000 per American. I submit that no American would vote for that willingly and say, yes, raise my share of the national debt by $50,000 because I'm going to get what from this budget? What American would vote for that? This budget, comparing apples to apples, it's a 30% increase, $1.4 trillion. For fiscal 23, over the last year, fiscal 20, before the government crushed the economy in the name of the China virus. So in other words, it was $4.4 trillion budget in fiscal 19. Now in fiscal 23, or fiscal 20 rather, is $4.4 trillion. Now in fiscal 23, it's $5.8 trillion, a 30% increase. Incredibly, the incompetent and irresponsible response of this administration beyond that is trillion-dollar increases in the deficit as far as the eye can see. Meanwhile, this administration, the president said it during the State of the Union speech, and you've said it already here this morning, we're trying to give ourselves a medal and pat ourselves on the back because we're going to be the first administration in the history of the country to cut the deficit by $1 trillion in a year. So just because we're not spending the ridiculous amount that was unwarranted in the name of the China virus for this, and we don't have quite that much spending in this bloated, exorbitant, massive budget proposal, Director Young, how can you keep the title of the Director of Management and Budget? Don't you think it should be called the Director of Mismanagement and Excessive Spending? I mean, is that management, is that budgeting what we're doing?
Mr. Good, if you would like a policy that cuts Medicare and Social Security, which you are promoting, either you raise revenues on the wealthy, or you
What I
cut- or you
propose
cut
is we
Medicare
don't
and Social
bankrupt the
Security.
future of America, and we don't do it on the backs of our children and our grandchildren.
Gentleman's time has expired.